Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today. We are going to be talking about preparing for college application season. David and myself are going to go over some of our best advice for doing so. So I hope this helps you as you head into the summer and get ready for those college applications. So just an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So our first agenda. First, we're going to give you a little intro to Study Hall College Consulting, our team, and our services. So what we provide and what you can get access to by contacting us. We're going to go over college list advice with David, and then I will jump in with some brainstorming essay ideas and tips about your essay structure and writing tips. So when you're actually thinking about writing those college applications. At the end, we're also going to save some time for you to ask questions. We have some questions that have come in beforehand as well that we will address. And then we'll have some final remarks to share with you. And just to note, if you are tuning in live, you'll get a special discount if you fill out our form at the end to get a quick 10% off. So that's awesome. So thank you for joining us. And without further ado, we will hop in. So first I'll introduce myself. So my name is Sarah. I'm part of the Study Hall College Consulting team, and I went to UC Berkeley, graduated in the class of 2020. My major was architecture, and I minored in Spanish language and literature. And I'm from Lafayette, California. So from California, local, and went to UC Berkeley. My current job right now, I work at a company called M-Train. I'm a client success manager, and I work as a product specialist as well. So in the tech sphere, and I work remotely right now. So currently kind of traveling around and taking advantage of that opportunity. And in college, I was working a lot of the time I was in college. So at UC Berkeley, I worked as an ambassador. I worked as the Cal Day Accepted Students Day coordinator for that really special event. And then also when everything went virtual due to COVID, I stepped in to do our virtual engagement program. So that was really rewarding for me. I got to work with a lot of students applying to college and admitted to college and kind of help them through that process. So I have a lot of experience there. And then I also had several internships, my favorite being as a design trainee at SFO, San Francisco International Airport. And since I did architecture, that was really up my alley. So a lot of my time in college was spent having that work experience, which I think has really contributed to, a lot of the things that I've done today and has taught me a lot of work ethic. And then the colleges I was accepted to, I applied to a lot of the UCs. So you'll see a lot of, UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Davis, Santa Cruz, and Irvine listed there. And then I did apply to some other smaller colleges kind of on the West Coast mainly as well. So I'll pass it on to David.
Hi, I'm David. I also went to Berkeley, the class of 2021. I majored in economics, minored in data science. I actually transferred from UCSB over to Berkeley in the fall of 2019, so my junior year, and I'm currently working as an associate consultant at Adobe. My hometown is San Jose, California. So like Sarah, I've kind of just mostly been in California a lot of my life. And my college involvements. So I was really involved with a lot of student orgs. So at Berkeley, I was super involved with the Berkeley Forum, organization that kind of hosted talks on campus. And at UCSB, I was really involved with the American Marketing Association. So yeah, like the title says, a marketing association that kind of served all of the students on campus. And as for internships, I was really involved in a lot of tech internships. So I interned at Cisco and Nutanix as more of a business operations role. And then my last internship was with Adobe in a consulting role before I moved full-time. As for colleges, I was accepted to. So again, a lot of the UCs, Berkeley, Santa Barbara, and a couple of other colleges as well. So SCU, UW, as well as UIUC.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So before we jump into our advice, we just wanted to go over our Study Hall College Consulting services that we do offer. And the first one being our college application essay review. So if you are someone looking to apply to college very shortly, we can help you actually go over your essays, whether it be the common application, supplemental essays, your letter of continued interest later on, if you do get waitlisted, or UC personal insight questions. So those are largely, essays are a really big component of the application process. And so that can often take the most time. So we're here to help you out with that and review your writing. And the way in which we do that is holistic yet detailed. So we are doing a thorough analysis of your story, the grammar and vocab in your essay, and your actual thesis. So what you're communicating to the reader, and really the big why, big picture idea of your essays, how to best present yourself to those admissions officers. We give paragraph explanations of how to improve. So we're really getting detailed. We're really giving our advice based on our experiences and our expertise, having years of experience editing essays. And we will give detailed suggestions. So our opinions, but also just best practices and ways of conveying your story to admissions officers. So a big portion of our services are these application essay reviews. And then we also do college and career coaching calls. So these can be really open-ended, and they're really designed to help you in whatever you need help with at that time. So you could ask questions about, our experiences in high school and college and beyond, our application journey, tips for going through the process. But we can also take that time to help you brainstorm essay ideas, for instance, or have that big picture discussion about who you are, what you want to communicate to admissions officers. The extracurricular activities section in your application, that's something that can be really difficult as well. And you have to be very detailed in that too. So we don't just talk about essays, we'll go over other parts of the application if you need it too. And all of our college experiences. So actually, once you get into college, what that looks like, building your schedule, finding housing, joining clubs, all of that kind of stuff. And we also do offer tutoring. So another one of our consultants, Navia, and myself, whether it be, in a specific subject that you're really needing help with, or writing workshops or things like that, we can set up actually consistent sessions with you to go over whatever you need help with. And additionally, if you want to just, get to know us and figure out which consultant is right for you, we'll do a quick free consultation with you just so you can meet us, kind of get a feel for our experiences and how we can help you the best way. So that's a quick overview of what we offer through Study Hall College Consulting. And now we're going to jump into some of our advice. So I'll let David take it away.
Cool. So we can move on to the agenda. So I'll be talking a lot about kind of the process before you actually start writing the essays, which Sarah's going to talk about. So factors to consider when applying to colleges, so things like the quality of education, location, student org culture, as well as financial aid. Actually creating your college list, so going over safeties, target, dream, and reach schools. And then finally, going through a college list spreadsheet. So actually organizing your college list, as well as providing a sample Excel sheet for everyone to use. So factors to consider. Obviously, education is a very big one. And when you think about education, obviously, one of those things you think about is whether or not you want to go to a public or private school. And one of those considerations is the size of the school. Typically, public school will be much, much bigger in terms of student population than a private school. Things to consider there are obviously individual attention from professors, as well as access to kind of resources. So definitely, I went to two public schools, and there were definitely times where I did feel that kind of, there's so many people here and I'm not getting the resources I need. There's just like too big of a line, for example, to access like mental health resources and things like that. So that's definitely something to consider. But on the flip side, because there are so many people at public schools, you really kind of get that sense of community. And I definitely do think there's a lot of merits to going to a school where, people really come from all walks of life. And just because a school is too big doesn't mean that, if you really look for those resources, you can't get them. There was never a time when I felt like I wasn't getting enough attention from professors. I really felt like, I had to maybe go the extra mile and go to their office hours and really try to seek them out. So maybe there's a little more effort there, but just because you go to a public school doesn't mean you can't get all of those resources if you really try. Another kind of consideration to think about is grade inflation and deflation. So there was actually a Washington Post article that came out that said that Harvard and a lot of the other Ivies, the kind of median grade that they give out is an A-. And Sarah and I and Rachel went to Berkeley, and we know that at public schools, that is pretty much not the case. The kind of average grade will typically be around a B, and some cases lower. So definitely something to consider if maybe you're thinking about grad school, something like that. These grad schools, obviously GPA isn't the only thing they look at, and they're very aware of inflation and deflation, but that is something to think about. And finally, really thinking about the kind of ease of major or acceptance into the major. And this is something that I was not very aware of before I attended college, but even if you're accepted into a major going into a school, at a lot of public schools, it's not a guarantee that you'll actually be able to major in it. So I got accepted as an economics major at UCSB, and I went in and I very quickly realized that there are prerequisites that you have to meet and a certain kind of GPA that you need to meet to actually get into a major like economics, which is very, very popular and very competitive. So definitely something you should think about when you're applying to these schools. Will I actually be able to major in the thing that I want? And really make sure that you're doing the research beforehand to really get clarity around this. Second is the quality of major department. So obviously this is really important. And I think something that people don't really think about when they go into these schools is really doing research into the kind of careers and companies that students from these different major departments actually go into after graduating. And I'll give you an example. So at UCSB, the economics department there is very kind of focused around getting people into the top 4 accounting firms. The accounting firms really come in and really recruit very heavily from the UCSB economics department. So if that's something that you want to go into, absolutely, it's a great school, it's a great department. And on the flip side, the UC Berkeley economics department, I would say the career paths are a bit different from that. They are more kind of maybe tailored towards like consulting, maybe more into tech companies because of our proximity to the Silicon Valley. So yeah, even though they were the same major, because they were at different schools, there were kind of different priorities and different paths that were easier to get into because of the different schools. So really do research around that when you're looking at these different schools. And then finally, the kind of question of whether you want to go to a more liberal arts school versus the more traditional school. So I don't really have much experience applying to liberal arts schools. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you apply to? Yes.
A couple of them, yeah. A lot of them were UCs, but I did here and there, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I guess if you have questions about that, Sarah would be the person to go to. But yeah, obviously that is a really big factor when you're considering schools. Financial aid considerations. So obvious one is the cost of the school. This isn't financial advice, but sometimes it's not really worth it to go into thousands of dollars into debt for a school if there are other better options available. And are there any special scholarships that you can apply to at the same time as the application that would actually make these schools that would previously be unfeasible, would these scholarships make attending these schools actually accessible to you? So this is something that I think goes really under the radar when applying to colleges. So really do research around whether or not there are these kind of scholarships that you can apply to at the same time that would make the burden of attending college a bit lighter. Student culture. So Greek life. So is the school kind of Greek life and sports oriented? Is a more professional org oriented? Again, different schools have very different social dynamics, and this is absolutely something that you should talk to people who actually attend this school. You should absolutely talk to them about this. You can read a lot online, but different people have different experiences, and you should really talk to people about what their experiences were at these schools. And finally, in terms of factors to consider, location. So things like the weather, the political climate of the town, the proximity to your hometown, as well as the quality or existence of a college town for that school. And that last one has like a much bigger impact than you may realize. So schools like the 2 schools that I attended, UCSB and Berkeley, they had huge, very much thriving college towns. And it really felt like you had a community, whereas maybe some other schools like UCSD, NYU, they're more like commuter schools. NYU in particular, obviously their campus is spread out across the city. Those are very, different experiences than what a college town may offer, and you may prefer one or the other, right? So really taking that into consideration, talking to people about how that affected their social lives, how that affected their campus lives, because yeah, it's going to make a really, really big difference on your kind of college experience. And the last thing that I put down was the kind of appearance of campus. And I actually don't think this is as important as maybe people may think. I know some people like want to like go onto campus, be like, oh my gosh, my campus is so pretty, which is definitely important. But I think once you kind of fall in love with a school and you fall in love with like the people that you meet there and the kind of experiences that you have there, you can kind of fall in love with spaces pretty quickly. Like I didn't find UCSB to be like super, like at least the buildings to be like super attractive when I first went there, but like I fell in love with the place very quickly because of the experiences that I had. So yeah, something to consider. Creating your college list. So I think this is like an age-old question, like how many schools should you apply to? And again, this is going to differ from person to person. It's also very much going to depend on your financial situation. If you can afford all of those kind of fees for applying to these schools. Personally, in my opinion, if you're not dealing with any financial restraints, I think you should apply to as many schools as you can that satisfy all the factors that we went over earlier in the previous two slides. Obviously, if you're applying to a lot of schools, you should really plan ahead and make sure that you can put full effort into all of the applications. But if you plan ahead and you have the financial needs or financial means, I really do think that, you know, if there are multiple schools that satisfy everything on your kind of list, then you should apply to all of them. As for classifications, I kind of classified them here. So dreams, these are kind of schools that you're applying to because, you know, you kind of regret it. Otherwise, you know, in the back of your head, you'll always be like I should have applied. For me, that was Stanford, didn't get in, but at least I tried, right? Reach schools. So schools are automatically reach schools, in my opinion, if they have less than a 20% acceptance rate. College admissions are obviously getting very, very competitive nowadays. And even if you have a perfect GPA and great test scores, if these schools have less than a 20% acceptance rate, you should classify them as reach because these are getting more and more competitive by the day. Target schools, you know, you think you have a good chance of getting into them. Your test scores are around the mean, maybe higher than the mean. And then obviously, finally, safety schools. So schools where your GPA and test scores are significantly higher and higher than the mean, and you're very confident that your kind of background and everything kind of matches up with what they would want to see in an admitted applicant. And I really want to stress this, and I kind of talked about this earlier, but you should really be excited to go to every school on your college list. You should not be applying to a school because your friends are applying to it, and it's like maybe I'll like it, and you don't do your research and you just throw it on your list, right? It's kind of like a waste of money to apply to a school if you don't really know everything about it. Really do your research and make sure it checks off everything on your checklist, and really make sure that you really would want to go to the school, even if it is a safety school, right? Really do your research and make sure that you would be excited to go to all of the schools on your list. And finally, I'll go over a kind of Excel sheet. So I took a lot of inspiration from a Reddit post that had a lot of this information, but you should really organize all of your all of your applications. There are definitely times when in high school I got that kind of email like, oh, your decision is out, and I'm scrambling to find my like username and password for my portal, and because I didn't really keep good track of it at the time. So this is an example of a sheet that you could use, keeping track of all of the application portals, your username to them, the passwords, when the application is actually due, when the decision date is, as well as a checklist for all the different things that you may need. So things like whether or not you sent the test scores, the supplements, the rec letters, any additional materials, and then finally that final kind of check for whether or not you submitted the application. And in the next slide, should have the link. Yeah, so that's a link to a template that you can use, and credit to the person on Reddit for the kind of general template that I used. And I'll provide the link in the chat as well. Oh, it looks like that was already provided. So yeah, that was me. Thanks everyone. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to populate the chat and afterwards as well.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, David. And I hope that helped you all kind of get an idea of what to look for when planning your college list. And that's something, again, that, you know, like David mentioned, we are more than happy to help you with if you want to reach out to us and we can talk one-on-one, give more advice, anything like that. So I will jump into college essay brainstorming and writing advice. And what I'll be covering today, we're going to start with brainstorming essay ideas. So actually, when you're going to write your essay, you see a prompt, really breaking down that prompt and figuring out what they're asking, how you can write a great outline for that essay and really cover everything that they're asking, and some tools and exercises for doing so. We'll also jump into essay structure and writing tips. So how to be a good storyteller and be creative with your writing. Common grammar and college essay mistakes, what I frequently see when editing essays, and then some best practices for actually going in and editing in the beginning of the process and then at the end of the process too. And this college essay writing is difficult and there's a lot that goes into it. And so this is going to definitely touch the surface and I'm going to give you some really great details. However, we also offer more in-depth help with this. So I do offer personalized writing workshops and tutoring sessions. I mentioned earlier that would be a consistent time, whether it was weekly or monthly, that you wanted to have help with writing these essays. So definitely reach out to us for more curriculum information on how we go about doing that, but you'll get a little taste today of what that looks like. So first, I'll start with breaking down the prompt. So when you're looking at an essay prompt, whether it be in the Common application, the personal insight questions for UCs, all of them are really asking the same thing. They want to know, who are you? What are your values and what is your story? And that's a really hard question to answer. And it really takes a lot of soul searching, a lot of deep thinking, introspection to figure out what you want to write about. But really, when you're thinking about who you are, what colleges want to know is how you can best show your growth, passion, and connection. And I think these three items are really, really important to focus on. So if you feel yourself getting lost, just think back and say, okay, is this example I'm providing, is this essay that I'm writing showing growth, passion, and connection? And what I mean by those three, growth would be, you know, are you showing a moment in which you really changed as a person? Are you showing a moment that really speaks to who you are? And are you showing humility, your ability to reflect on your past experiences and say, you know, you weren't always a perfect person, but you're learning and growing and you're a product of that growth. Passion is really important too. Your passions are going to change over time. Mine did a million times over in college, even after college, but that's okay. Whatever you're passionate about right now, show that commitment and show to a college that you really care about what you're doing, because that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for activities or anything that just make you look good. They really want to know that you're committed and that you are really passionate about what you're doing. And the last one, connection, a really important component of your essays, is showing that human connection, showing empathy, and showing that you want to have an impact larger than yourself. And so that's something that I really look for when in essays that I edit, is that, you know, okay, beyond this personal experience that happened to you, how is it impacting those around you? And how are you going to have that, make that reader have a human to human connection with yourself through your writing? So again, focused growth, growth, passion, and connection. And what you will also notice when you're looking at these prompts is that there's generally in any prompt going to be these three components of past, present, and future. And oftentimes the future part of this is going to be kind of implied, and I'll say what I mean by that. But for instance, when you're going through a prompt like this, recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So really what they're asking in this prompt is for you to first reflect on an event. It's going to be a tangible moment, an experience that happened in the past, and how you reacted to that experience. So that's the past portion of it. And that past event has to really connect to who you are today, how you've grown since that moment, and why it's really important to be sharing that event with the admissions officers. And so you have, you know, that kind of gives you the bigger, starting to think of the bigger why question, why it's important. And often what you don't see in these prompts is they also want you to take it a step further and say, okay, this is who I am today. So this is how I'm going to contribute to my future communities that I'm involved in college and beyond. And that one's really the harder one to get at. But think about when you're answering, when you're reading a prompt, do you have all of those components in there? Because the past can be a really great way to show that example, show who you are today, and then how you'll take that forward. So we're going to jump more into detail about what that means, but those are really good components to be thinking about to help yourself not get lost in your brainstorming. And so what I really like to do, and what I did when I was writing my college essays, is kind of go through these steps when you're looking at a prompt. So first, read it in its entirety. Don't think about jotting down notes just yet. Just get a feel for what the question is asking overall. Just, let your mind think whatever answers that kind of come to mind. So after you do that, then you would read it a second time, a third time, this time actually taking time to write down all of the components of the prompt itself. So for instance, this is another example of a prompt. Describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. So the most important thing that they're asking in this prompt is for you to describe an example of your leadership experience. So you want to make sure in your answer that you are thinking about a specific leadership experience. You're thinking about a very specific example. So not just the fact that you were a leader over your course of time in high school, but really a clear example of when that happened. And then in this prompt, they're kind of giving you hints as to what you could talk about. So positively influencing others, resolving disputes, contributing to group efforts. That's where in this prompt particularly, they're really asking for that connection portion of it. So what is your impact on other people? How did you help other people? And then you can ultimately take that into who you are today and who you're going to be moving forward. But what you really want to make sure is that when you're writing your essay, you can say, hey, I have this exact example. It's an example of my leadership experience. And you really know that you're getting at the essence of what they're asking. And then, like I mentioned earlier, what are they implying? That's really that big picture why. Why is it important and how is it going to impact your future? So again, this is something that's really helpful to dive into workshops for and kind of figure out once you have your examples, once you've brainstormed, how you can really take it a step further. So writing outlines. One thing that's really helpful to do to make sure that you don't get lost in your own outlining is to keep your main idea in mind. So what is the big takeaway? Do you want the admissions readers to know that you're a compassionate person? Do you want them to know that you are a committed person or a creative person or something like that? You really want to keep that in mind when you're telling your story. In academic writing, a lot of things that I learned when I was younger is the Piketty format. So that actually spells out to be, your main point, context, example, analysis, and then kind of the tie back for your story. And so that's really a way to set up your main point, give an example, kind of analyze that and reflect on it and make sure it all ties back together. But what's really fun about college essays is you can take kind of your academic structure, what you've learned in your writing classes thus far, and add a little more creativity and storytelling. And so these components are what are really helpful to have in your essays. First, having a hook that really draws people in. So having really vivid details of the story you're about to tell, making the reader feel like they're actually in that moment with you. What's really helpful at that point is to have a clear example, content, context, and then this really vivid memory. So something that you can really paint a picture of and really share emotions of that moment. So if it was, for instance, a day that you won soccer championship at your high school, you want to tell them how you were feeling, how people around you were feeling, and really make them feel that moment as you're reflecting on it. And then you can kind of go into that realization component of, okay, you have this memory. Now, what did you get out of it? Now, actually, that's more of the introspective part of it. And how does that craft who you are today, the characteristics that make you, you? And then you can carry that into the future. So who you are moving forward from that point. So what I like to do is you can just create boxes for each of these and you're thinking about, an idea of what you want to write an essay about. Does it have all of these components? And that's a really great way to organize your thoughts as you write. So some tools and exercises. One of my favorite things to do is to write lists. This sounds, tedious. You just are kind of like sitting down at a paper and writing out these ideas, but it really helps to brainstorm these things. So if you have a rule where you're going to say, I'm going to do 5 to 10 things for each of these components, that's going to really help you just kind of rack your brain for ideas. So for instance, write down a list of 5 of your top interests or your talents and skills or your favorite personal characteristics about yourself. Or for instance, your best memories. So your memories when you were happiest, the memories when you were the most sad or the most scared. And that's really hard to sometimes come to mind. So it might take some time, but it really gets you to start thinking about your experiences. Other ones could be people that have had the biggest impact on you around you, whether that be your parents or a mentor you had in school or, extracurriculars, or biggest world problems you wish you could solve. And I know at this moment, there's a lot of world problems all of us wish we could solve. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go out and do it, but it shows where your passions lie and it shows where you really want to contribute the most. And so that can help you kind of bring that out of yourself. A game that I think is really helpful, and I actually played just last night, is this idea of campfire stories. So there's a lot of games out there where you can find cards that are giving you basically prompts to tell stories about yourself. And one of the ones I played last night, one of the prompts was tell a story about the time you pushed yourself farther than you thought you could ever go. And so those are pretty deep. It gets you to start thinking about all of these memories in your past, and you can start writing those down and say, well, maybe that would be a good engaging story for an essay later on. And it also helps you learn how other people tell compelling stories and how you can kind of set the tone and the cadence for keeping people engaged in that story when you're actually talking one-on-one with someone. Another thing that I do, and I did throughout college, is keeping a journal and kind of free writing about experiences that you have on the day-to-day. That's a really great way to process your emotions, and it kind of makes you more aware in the moment so that later on it's a little bit easier to reflect on your past experiences too. Some other tools and exercises, if you don't have a resume already, creating a resume for yourself can be a really great way of remembering what you've done, celebrating your own accomplishments, jobs, volunteer work, passion projects, etc., and making sure that you're not selling yourself short. So if you had to describe that experience to someone, how would you do that on paper? So it's a really great practice to get in the hang of, and resumes are really important after college as well. So you kind of get that practice for the future too. Another one that's great is asking a friend to describe you and list your talents. So go up to one of your friends and say, if you had to describe me, what would you say? And give them a minute to talk about you. And that might be hard for them to do, but you might start to be able to pick out certain things about yourself that you didn't even notice to begin with. Another one is using other college prompts as practice. So other colleges that you might have no interest in applying to, again, a lot of prompts are going to be asking very similar things, just in different ways. And so reading a bunch of different ways of wording that kind of question can help you think of, what you want to write in many different ways. So it could be asking about, a happy experience that you had. It could be asking about, even like a specific problem in the world that you find really interesting. It could be asking about a moment in which you showed leadership or whatever, but it kind of gets you to think about your memories in a different way. And then finding successful college essays from other people. So this one you want to be really careful with, because you can get an idea of setting the tone and how people write as an example for, advice in which you could write, but you really don't want to copy these essays. Your essay should be about you, should be about your experiences, but it can really help to see, okay, what is the tone that people are setting? How are people telling their story? What kind of detail are they giving in the beginning? And so that can help on a very high level. But again, you want to make sure that you do not copy essays. It's going to be really easy to tell when it's not something that's coming from your heart. So you want to make sure that you are writing about yourself. And then jumping off of here, going into storytelling and creativity. So the most important thing about storytelling is that you are showing versus telling. So what I mean by that is that it's really helpful to have concrete examples. And as we went through that prompt, you see that usually they're asking for a very specific experience, a very specific moment. So you want to find examples and memories in your life that can really show a certain characteristic about you. You can be telling the reader kind of what you're getting and how you reflected, how you reacted to that situation, but it's much more genuine and much more effective than just saying, I did this and I did this, and this is how, this is who I am today because of that, but really showing what happened, how other people reacted to it, how you observed other people feeling about that situation. It can really show your story in a more, I would say, efficient way than you just kind of talking about yourself. Vivid details to communicate the big picture of why. So it's really helpful to engage people and have really, really nice details to really have them feel that moment, but you want to make sure you don't get lost in just explaining the details of what's happening, the step-by-step kind of cadence of the event. You want to make sure that there's actually a purpose to why you're taking the reader through those steps. There's also a really important emphasis on conflict in the story. And so you can look at this story arc at the bottom of the page, but it's really important. This challenge is often what, makes a story very genuine. So someone that goes through, when you think of, someone telling you a story, what really makes it interesting is the moment in which they experience a challenge and how they got past that and what that says about them and their kind of work ethic. So you want to make sure that it's not just a story with no pushback with, I did this and that's how it ended, but really you're approaching an issue, you're thinking about how to solve it, and then how did you actually get past it? So that's going to keep people engaged. It's going to be really relatable to people because we all go through really big challenges in life. And so it's a great way to keep people engaged. And then at the end of this, like it mentions, good stories bond people over human connection. So find that human to human connection, find something that's relatable, something that someone else can read and say, either they're in awe of your story or they really get that on a personal level about the struggle you went through or the takeaway that you had. So you really want to kind of get them to stay engaged and kind of bring them in instead of just having them on the outside reading your essay. So again, there are a lot of ways to do this. And I really like, reading these essays and kind of helping you guide you along that process to making that great engaging story. So please reach out if you do have questions about that. Other essay mistakes that I often do find, one thing that's really common is that folks will write their essays and they're not necessarily answering the prompt. And this can be a really hard one to identify, but we mentioned this earlier on. You can go through the whole process of writing your essay and then realize you didn't really specifically talk about a specific example of leadership experience, for instance, or you kind of spent too much time setting the context for your story and didn't really give them the answer, the big picture answer. So this is something to look out for and making sure that when you're first reading the prompt, you're underlining, you're listing out what they're really looking for. Oftentimes stories can feel like a disconnected string of ideas without focusing on that main takeaway. So that's why it's really important to think about, what is the characteristic? What is the big idea that I want my reader to take away from this? If they had to explain me in one sentence, what would they say? You also want to make sure that you're looking out for repetition. So if you are writing a bunch of sentences, this is something that I really had to look out for in my college essays. I really wanted to explain what I wanted to explain in a very perfect way. So I would find 2 or 3 sentences, but they all kind of ended up saying the same thing, just in different words. And it was my way of, talking around the issue or trying to figure out the best way to explain every single aspect of it. And what you can do is you can read those sentences and find connections between all of them. And that's a really great way to limit your word count and also make your language more succinct and more direct. Grammar is another really big one. So when you're going through your essays at the end, making those smaller edits, you want to make sure spelling is correct, particularly of important names. So if you're addressing a letter to someone specifically, if you're spelling the name of a college or something like that, or a department, you want to double, triple check that to make sure that you're spelling it correctly. Other words too, but especially if you spell the college you're applying to incorrectly, that's not great for your essay. Punctuation and run-on sentences as well. So this is where reading aloud can really help you and kind of finding the natural cadence of pauses when you're reading. Improper vocabulary choices and word count. So a lot of times folks will, go to a thesaurus and try to find a word that really sounds good in their essay. And while that can kind of expand your vocabulary, sometimes you might use a word incorrectly because you're not familiar with how it's usually used. You don't know the context of it, and then it can actually be used incorrectly. So you want to make sure that you're not just using a new word just to use it, but that you really understand how to use that word. Word count too. So this is something that can be often tough to get down towards the end of your essay. And I have a slide just about word count, but making sure that you're being efficient in your writing, that you're not having extraneous words that you don't really need when you're writing. Verb tenses would also be one. So making sure that you're not really switching in between sentences to something that happened in the past and then something in the future and something in the present. Really start by talking about the past, then move on to the present, and then move on to the future and what you'll do from then. It makes it a little bit easier to follow for the reader. All right, and then word count. This is a really hard one. So word count is something that a lot of people struggle with, and a lot of essays will have very strict counts that you have to meet. So one of the most important things that you can do is focus on eliminating the sentence fluff in your essays and writing confidently. So as an example, something that I did a lot is that I would write, I believe that it's important to do blank versus it is important to do blank. If you start with the second one, it's already implied that you believe that it's important to do something, and then you can take out those first few words and actually get your word count down quite significantly. And this applies itself in many different ways, but it's a really good example of kind of, reading between the lines and saying, is everything I'm saying really necessary to include? Eliminating your passive voice. So if you're thinking about a sentence like Anna painted the house versus the house was painted by Anna. The second one is more passive and it also uses more words. So you want to put yourself in the front seat and actually focus on, you as the subject of doing something versus something being done to you or something being done to someone else. That also limits the number of words that you're using in that phrasing too. Again, repetition and introducing new information. So as you're reading through all of those sentences, is every sentence you're including actually introducing new information, or are you just saying the same thing but in different words? And that, again, can be really hard to do, but you want to make sure you're actually analyzing every sentence that's included. And you will be reading over these essays a bunch. So sometimes it can help for someone else to read it too and think, is this actually introducing something new? And then another one would be kind of a disproportionate context to reflection. So what I mean by that is you really want to be vivid in your storytelling. You really want to paint this picture, but you don't want, 70% of your essay just to be about the context, telling a memory, telling a story, and then you don't leave very much room to say what that really means to you and why that makes you a good applicant. So don't get too caught up in that vivid imagery, that vocabulary, but really make sure there's a bigger picture and a bigger reason to the story that you're telling. And that can be really helpful because oftentimes that context is where you're going to find most of that fluff. So you can edit down in the beginning and make it really succinct to start out with. So that's all I have. And I know that's a ton of information. Both of our presentations definitely, all of this is being recorded and it's going to be posted online so you can rewatch it and ask us more questions. But with that, we'll kind of wrap up from here. So I hope that what we talked about was useful. As you head into the summer, a lot is going to be going on in your life and preparing for college. And so we want to offer you all of the resources we have. So aside from the advice we shared today and our coaching calls and essay services, we also have an advice blog. And so we will post that pretty frequently and give different advice about things, whether it's the college application or writing your essays or things like that. Before I actually share further, let's just hop back to questions from the audience and some questions that we received earlier on.
Sure. Yeah, I can start with a couple of the questions that were submitted beforehand. And obviously, if you have any questions, put them in the chat pod. So I'll start with this one. What should I look out for when attending college tours? Are there any green or red flags to consider? I can go first on this one. I think I mentioned earlier on my when I was talking that maybe don't put like 100% of the weight of whether or not you're going to go to school on the appearance of the college campus. You can very easily fall in love with this place if the other experiences are good. I think something to also consider is if you're going on a college tour on a kind of special day. So at Berkeley, that's like Cal Day, UCSB has something similar. There may be like, I know like during Cal Day, like there's like always a ton of parties going on. And it's like, we make it a point to like party on that day because there's like students coming in and UCSB, they always try to like align the day that new students come to tour with like the day they like party a ton. Maybe just be aware if something like that happens, and just know that it's not like 100% accurate portrayal of what a school is. So yeah, maybe just like to keep in mind. I can move on to the next one. Yeah, Sarah, if you want to add anything to.
No, I think you covered that one well. We can move on to one of the other ones.
Sure. I'm not sure what I want to study in college. How should I go about creating a college list?
Yeah. You want to take that one because it ties to your presentation?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of other considerations you should take into account besides from just purely academics, right? So things like the extracurriculars, the culture of the campus, the location, the existence of like a college town, things like that, I think are very, very important and definitely things you should really research. I think if academics is something that you're really, really worried about, I think if you're not quite sure what you want to major in, maybe also do some research around kind of how easy it is to jump around majors in a school. So a lot of schools, a lot of the majors are kind of housed in the College of Letters and Sciences, and then there's like a specific engineering school and a specific like chemistry school. And in some schools, it's really hard to kind of jump around those majors, right? Because there's not enough space for everyone. So maybe do some research around how easy it is to actually switch majors in a school. If maybe you start a major and you decide you don't like it, I think that would be a pretty good use of time just to kind of, if you are not super sure about what you want to major in going in. Next question, do you recommend writing multiple essays for the same prompt about different topics?
Cool. Yeah, that's a good question. I can take that one. So I do not think it's a bad idea to do that. I think that it would help you brainstorm, definitely, to write multiple answers to the prompts and to, especially in the brainstorming phase to kind of figure out what the right story is to tell for you. There's a lot that goes into the college application process, so it can be overwhelming later on to kind of be putting the same amount of effort into multiple different essays, but it can really help you think about which story is going to tell the story about you the best. And you can also have other people kind of read those stories and tell you which one is the most compelling. Something that I find really helpful is that you can tend to, a lot of essays for different colleges will be very similar, and you can start to have these essays that you always come back to for different colleges. You do really want to be careful to make sure you're not mentioning the actual name and the college of these essays, but you can definitely reuse essays, and that will save you a lot of time. And so a lot of times, like I mentioned, they are asking kind of a similar thing. So finding different ways to describe that could be definitely helpful.
All right, next question. When editing, how do I balance my parents' input and keeping my essay and story mine? My parents seem to never be satisfied with my writing and want me to change everything.
Yeah, that's also a really great question, and can be kind of a big challenge for a lot of students. I know for me also, there was always kind of this pressure to, I would write something and I'd want to hear their feedback about it because, if your parents are really supportive, that means a lot to you. One thing to keep in mind is that your college essays are always about you. They're going to be admitting you as a person, not your parents. And so you really this is a time to practice a lot of independence, especially if it's something that is really new to you in kind of branching out from your parents' advice. Not to say that it's not valuable. Parents are really helpful in this process, and can be really helpful in kind of making you think about ideas differently. But make sure that you are always prioritizing kind of your own opinion about your writing. And ultimately, if they're never satisfied with your writing, you can also reach out to other folks and kind of see what they think about it too. Your parents' advice doesn't have to be, the top one that you're looking for, even though, that's harder said than done. But just keep it in mind. It should be about you. It should make you feel good and make you feel proud of yourself. And that gut feeling is really important.
I can add a little bit to that as well. I actually wrote like a couple of my college essays about my parents. And I told them that, and I didn't want them to read it because I felt like that would kind of ruin the integrity of it. So I guess that would work out differently for different parents. But yeah, I guess another thing to maybe keep in mind.
Definitely. Yeah.
And the last of our pre-submitted questions, were you actually excited to go to every college on your college list? I can't seem to find excitement for many schools. I personally did, just because I didn't want to spend money on applications that, you know, even if I was accepted, I wouldn't consider anyway, right? So every school that I applied to had its merits and had different, had reasoning for why I would actually attend if it came down to that. I can't seem to find much excitement for many schools. That's definitely it's a tough question. Um, I think college, there are so many different aspects of a school that can make it appealing to different people, and maybe things that you don't realize right now if you're in high school. Um, I think one of the biggest things I didn't realize that was so important about our school is just the culture in general. Like definitely just talk to people at different schools and see what their kind of experiences were, and maybe you'll kind of find your niche in the kind of experiences that they describe. Definitely just talking to real people about their experiences, I find to be a lot more helpful than just reading up some articles online and just looking at the college websites. Those are helpful, but obviously real people, real experiences are what you really want to hear. So yeah, I would definitely just recommend talking to different people in the schools.
Yeah. Another tool you can use for that too is, a lot of times if you're not really excited about a school, it may be because you don't know everything there is to know about it, which is super hard to do. You're never going to know everything there is to know. But kind of pretending that you are attending that university for a day. That's a tool that I heard from a lot of my fellow ambassadors, really taking that day and saying, okay, for instance, I am a Golden Bear. I go to UC Berkeley. What are my favorite things about it? You do a little bit more research and try to kind of fire yourself up and give yourself that whole day to get excited about it. And if you really can't get into it after that day, maybe that's telling you a little bit about where your passions lie and what's going to, draw you in the most. But that can help you, kind of pretending you are there helps you learn a little bit more about the gut feelings you're going to feel about that place. Great questions. Cool.
That was all the pre-submitted ones, and it doesn't look like there's any in the chat right now. Yeah. So
Cool.
I guess we're all good. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you do have any questions after this, again, this will be posted online onto our YouTube channel. So if you think of any later, definitely please reach out to us. We want to talk more about these subjects. There's way more than can be covered in just an hour. So definitely keep thinking. I will move on to talk a little bit more about our advice blogs. So I mentioned earlier, we do have advice blogs that go above and beyond what we talked about today. We will post those pretty frequently about anything under the moon. So it could be writing your college essays. It could be some of the things you see on the screen right now, breaking down the common application essay prompts, semester versus quarter system, which is right for you, finding research opportunities, letters of recommendation. So we also take questions from our listeners and people that follow us on Instagram or wherever you may have heard of us. If you have something you want to hear about, let us know and we'll write about it. And we really want to help you out with the things that matter most to you. So let us know what you're looking for. And we also have a newsletter. We have social media. So you can follow us on Instagram. You can visit our website, look at our LinkedIn, our YouTube channel where this will be posted. This is one of many webinars, student speaker series that we do. So if you go onto our YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of different topics covered. And all of our webinars are free. So you can pass them on to your friends. You can join the next ones. We want to make sure that college help is accessible. So that's really why we're passionate about doing these webinars. And then we have a Facebook page and email, of course, as well. So definitely connect with us on all of those. And with that, we're nearing the end of our webinar. So thank you to everyone that attended, and thank you to everyone now watching online in the future. And if you did attend live, you can get your 10% off. So make sure you complete the form here. We're going to throw this in the chat too. Looks like it was just done. So go to this URL and fill it out to get your discount. And we hope to see you soon. We hope to help you with whether it be your essay review or college coaching calls. And again, it was recorded. So if you want to watch any of it over, I know it was a ton of information, a ton of talking. So feel free to rewatch any of this if you'd like. But thank you, everyone. And have a great rest of your day.
Hi, everyone.